Hey everyone, I am Lauren. Welcome back to Take Action Tuesday. I am so excited you are with us this week because we are talking about a really big topic. We are going to be discussing grid size. I often see questions about how you pick a grid size, where do you start with grid size, and that is what we're going to be talking about today. So, if you are ready, let's dive in. Before we tackle this question, I really want you to remember that AAC is not one size fits all. What works for my client might not work for your client, might not work for the kid next door. So we really need our individual to lead this decision. This is crucial that we are not picking grid sizes based on our choice, but rather based on the AAC user's choice. And I completely realize as a professional or as a parent, it's really hard to learn multiple systems. And it can be incredibly frustrating, especially if there are different grid size and different language systems. But remember, we are here to support that individual's communication. So it's really up to us to support that. So, with all that being said, some factors that might impact your grid size selection. One, an individual's vision. If they have challenges with vision, you may need to make adjustments to that grid size or consider alternate forms of access. An individual's motor skills. Sometimes when we do those alternate forms of access, the larger grid size are harder to access. Sometimes the smaller grid sizes are just really limiting and require a lot of motor abilities to move through the systems. You also do want to consider cognitive load. I don't want this to be your big ticket consideration, but I do want you to keep it in mind while you're moving through. Factors that we are not considering. We are not looking at their age. If they are young, they can still access a large grid size. We are not looking at that. If they are older, they can still access a large grid size. We're also not looking at communication partner preference. It goes back to what I had said earlier. We're doing this for the AAC user, not for yourself. And then the last one is their current communication profile, their current vocabulary profile. And I say that we're not considering this because what I often see is people start AAC and say, well, they don't have any language. We're just going to start them with 4 locations, 4 words, and we're going to teach those, and then we're going to build it and grow it. And this is really problematic, and we're going to talk about why it's problematic in just a minute. We want to remember that grid size should remain consistent as possible over time. So we want to start with that large grid size. And why is that so important? Here is why. 1, motor planning. Our brains develop motor memory of where locations are located on an AAC device. If you take the start small and then grow approach, you're going to ask everyone to relearn that layout frequently as you add vocabulary. And this is not an efficient use of the AAC user's time or energy. Number 2, everyone deserves access to robust vocabulary. You should be presuming competence and allowing individual access to vocabulary and keyboards so that they can say whatever they want. You should not be the gatekeeper of their language. When we start with smaller vocabularies, it's a lot harder to get access to all that language. When you start with smaller grids, it's a lot harder to get access to all that language. So, if you're still looking for a little more information on why that motor planning piece and that consistency piece is so important, I want you to think about typing. You learned how to type when you were in grade school. The letters and the keys on that keyboard have been in the same location your entire life. The entire time that you've been typing, they have been in this format. And they don't move. And we didn't start with 3 and then add 6 and then add 12. We started with an entire keyboard, and then they taught specific letters on that keyboard. They didn't give you just the letter A and you pressed the letter A in the middle of your keyboard and then they moved it over while they added a new one. You had access to it the whole time. The same thing applies to AAC. You learn that motor memory, you learn that speed and accuracy with a larger grid size, and then you can add in more vocabulary and you're not relearning the whole system. If someone were to change your entire keyboard, it would take you a very long time to create a message. It would also be incredibly frustrating. Okay, so hopefully now you have an understanding of why larger grid sizes are important when appropriate for the individual. But how do we really determine what to use? And this is what that evaluation component is for. This is why we trial devices and see what works best for the individual. And I will say, generally speaking, apps have a start point. And when I say a start point, I really want to make clear I am not saying that this is the grid size you have to use. It's just a grid size that either the app recommends or I frequently see people start with and then move either direction from. So, Proloquo Go actually recommends a 77 location grid. They recommend 7 by 11. You even see it when you select grid sizes, it says recommended. LAMP is an 84 location grid. TouchChat WordPower doesn't have any recommendations, but what I most frequently see in practice and looking and talking with other SLPs is that we often start at 60 or 80. And then TD Motor Plan, if you're looking at their highest grid size, it's a 66. And then if you're looking at TD Snap Core, there's their core first page set. The highest you can go is 80. So again, these numbers are by no means what you need to use, but I put them here because you can see there's this range between 60 and 80. Apps are recommending and starting between 60 and 80 most frequently. And this is what I want you to know. When you start here, you can then evaluate. You can say, okay, you know what? We started with 80, but access was really difficult and we weren't consistent with our selections and we had a lot of difficulty. And then we can discuss possibly decreasing that grid size. The opposite can be true, and you can say we started with 60 or we started with 80, and you know what? It was super simple. They were able to learn the new words, they were able to navigate through it. They didn't require a lot of support from me. We should look at a larger grid size. So this is going to be really individualized. It's going to be dependent on that client specifically. And again, this is part of that evaluation process. This is what we're doing to support deciding what app is best. I will note that there is an app called AAC Genie that has an assessment component that does look at grid size. Basically, you're finding a specific location in large, like incrementally larger grid sizes. I personally do not use it, but I know many SLPs that do. I often just evaluate grid size through informal assessment and observation. We start with one, we see how it's going, we change it up based on that individual's needs. So this week, I want you to take inventory of the grid sizes you are using. Are they big enough for your students? Do they support their language? And then next week, I want you to come back and join me, and we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of hiding vocabulary and vocabulary building and how it can integrate with our students that we work with. So before you head out, I do want to mention we are hosting a February AAC challenge next week. It starts on February 6th. It'll run for 5 days. It costs $5 to join, but we are going to go very deep into selecting vocabulary that's going to best support your AAC user. And I understand that these apps come with that vocabulary, but when you understand what vocabulary your AAC user needs, it really sets the foundation for more supportive and successful implementation. So the link is below if you are interested in joining us, and I would love for you to be there. So I will see you next week.